Hi everyone, so today we're downloading RatOS and we're installing it on the Big Tree Tech Pad 7. So to do this, you want to find the downloadable images of the latest version. For that we go to GitHub and you'll see under the RatOS GitHub repository, you will need to find the latest version, which in this case is 2.0.1. And in here you should find some asset files at the bottom of the changelog, and you want to choose the CB1 version of these downloadable files, so the img.xz file. And I'll just copy the URL and I'll launch Balena Etcher and just paste that URL into it so that it can actually download it and burn it at the same time. So that's quite a handy tool. So here we go in flash from URL and you just paste that URL in there, and Balena is going to contact the server, download the image and burn it at the same time. So right now what you need to do is select the target. So the drive that is the micro SD card, that has the micro SD card. And then once that's chosen, just flash it. Just be very careful not to flash the wrong thing. So you might want to be extra careful there because you might probably overwrite something you don't want to. So once that burning process is completed, it'll go through validation phase, which I don't usually bother with, but it's good practice if you want to do that, then go ahead. So once the image has been burned to the SD card, you want to open up the boot volume on that SD card, and there you'll find a few configuration files that are going to be quite interesting. So in the board.env.txt, I just decided to uncomment the SPI to Canvas module. And for those who are already familiar with RatOS, you know that the RatOS-WPA-supplicant.txt is a configuration file where you put your Wi-Fi settings and network settings. So that's probably something you want to change as well. Then finally, we open the system.cfg file, and that one contains a few more settings for the BTT Pad 7 particularly. I believe that this applies to the CB1 ecosystem. So for example, I'm changing the hostname to Pad 7. This is very suitable for me to find the device on my network. There seems to be another Wi-Fi SSID in there, which I'm just filling in with my details. Obviously, my password remains secret, so you won't see that, but there are some other settings in there that seem to be very BTT Pad 7 specific. So for example, the BTT Pad 7 as a global flag has to be on, presumably to enable its features. Touch on vibration is probably something that I would like. Touch on sound, probably not. I'll leave that off. And then there's the auto brightness settings. So what I found out is to SSH into the device, you have to SSH as user BQ at hostname, which in my case is the Pad 7. The password is also BQ. That's easy. However, I noticed that the BQ home folder is empty, so there's no Clipper software or any supporting software in there. That leads me to believe that there must be a home Pi user, and indeed there is, and there seems to be all the Clipper related software installed in there. So that's what we're going to use as the main login user. We're just going to use the Pi user, and presumably the password is Raspberry. So in order to make my life easier, I logged out of the BQ user, I logged out of my SSH session completely and decided to re-SSH in as the Pi user. So SSH Pi at Pad 7 in my case, and the password is indeed Raspberry. So now that we're fairly happy with the setup of the operating system and logging in, we're going to check out some configuration files. Generally, you should find your configurations under printer_data/config, and that's where you usually put your printer.cfg and your Moonraker files, Clipper screen, etc. In my case, since none of the settings have changed on the machine, I'll just copy over the existing printer config that I had from my previous machine, and my previous machine host name is RR in this case, RatRig, and I'll just copy that over into this device. So at this point, I just want to make sure that the printer.config file is the one that I intended to use, and I'll just open that using Nano. And then after all that's verified, I'll just restart the Clipper firmware. So as a final step, I need to set up my beacon probe. And in order to do that, you just follow the instructions on the Beacon website, and it's a matter of cloning their repo and running an install script. Since I already have all my printer configs in the printer.cfg, there's no additional configuration per se for the device, so there's only like that one step that was needed, which is essentially cloning their repo onto the system. So following the other steps mentioned in the quick start, there's a section there for the Moonraker Update Manager. That's already actually in one of my config files on the other printer, so I won't be doing that. I'll just copy it over later on. But just skimming through here, the beacon config in the printer.config is already set up. The virtual end stops and all that calibration, none of that's required because I've already done that setup previously and the hardware hasn't changed. So in this case, it's a matter of going back into the config folder and copying over the moonraker.config file. And that should be it. I should have the update manager controlling the updates for the beacon and some of the other plugins that I have as well. So just making sure that I copied the right file, everything seems fine, and there you go. The printer is now all set up. So here's the device booting up, and there's some strange screen flickering. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but the device seems to be booting, and we've got a new boot logo. Seems to be a big tree, possibly a big tree text new logo. I'm not sure about that. Anyways, we've got the device booting up, and at this point I don't expect to see any further issues. Right, so now we're fully booted up into Clipper screen, and first thing is to check whether the homing works. So we'll just do that, and yeah, the bed seems to work fine. The head is homing in the expected direction. Nothing surprising really, because none of the configuration itself has changed. So this should be working just like the previous printer was. And at this point, I think I'll call that a success. I'll print something later on, but I don't see any issues, any apparent issues, and I'll update you guys if anything comes up. Cheers.